Close your eyes for a second and picture Maine the way most people do. Pine trees, lighthouses, cold oceans, quiet towns. Now imagine this. Long before Maine was even a state, before the U.S. flag flew over its harbors, the lives of people here were already connected to the Muslim world. Not through headlines or conflict, but through trade, survival, and shared humanity. This part of Maine's story is rarely told, and once you hear it, you'll never see this place the same way again. Long before 1820, when Maine officially became a state, its coastline was one of the most active maritime regions in North America. Maine-built ships sailed farther than most Americans realize. They crossed the Atlantic, entered the Mediterranean, and docked in ports ruled by Muslim powers in North Africa and the Ottoman world. Moroccan, Algerian, Tunisian, and Ottoman ports were not foreign enemies at first. They were trading partners. In fact, Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States in 1777, and American ships from New England, including Maine, benefited from that relationship. That treaty of friendship with a Muslim nation still exists today, making it the longest unbroken treaty in U.S. history. But there's a side of this story that rarely makes it into textbooks. When Maine sailors traveled these waters, they didn't just carry lumber and fish. They carried stories back home about Muslim societies that were organized, educated, and powerful at a time when the United States was still fragile. Some sailors were captured during conflicts in the Mediterranean and lived for years among Muslim communities. Many accounts show they were shocked not by cruelty, but by discipline, law, and religious structure they encountered. These experiences quietly shaped how early Americans understood the wider world, even if they didn't always admit it publicly. Even earlier than that, Maine's indigenous Wabanaki people had their own encounters with Muslims, indirect but real. Through European trade networks, ideas, words, and goods from the Muslim world traveled astonishing distances. The global economy of the 1600s and 1700s was already interconnected. Islam wasn't a stranger to the Atlantic world. It was part of its bloodstream. While Maine itself was remote, it was never isolated. Fast forward to the 1800s. Maine's ports thrived, but its people also suffered. Dangerous sea labor, economic crashes, and brutal winters pushed many Mainers to the edge. At the same time, Muslim-majority regions across the world were facing colonization and upheaval. What's rarely acknowledged is that ordinary people on both sides experience the same things: displacement, poverty, and resilience. This shared struggle doesn't fit the simple us versus them story we are often told, but history is rarely that simple. Now let's jump to the moment most people think Muslims arrived in Maine: modern immigration. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Muslim refugees, especially from Somalia, began settling in cities like Lewiston. The headlines often focused on fear, tension, and culture shock. But what actually happened on the ground tells a deeper story. These Muslim families arrived with almost nothing, many escaping war, famine, and foreign intervention. They didn't come looking for handouts, they came looking for safety. Slowly, they rebuilt. Abandoned buildings became homes again. Empty downtown spaces turned into businesses. Mosques became centers not just of prayer, but of community support, charity, and stability. Crime did not spike the way people feared. Schools adapted. Economies stabilized. The same values that had sustained Muslims for centuries: discipline, family, patience, faith, helped revive parts of Maine that had been quietly dying. What's powerful here is the contrast. Maine, a state built on hard work, survival, and faith, found itself aligned, whether it realized it or not, with Muslim values that emphasize endurance and responsibility. The similarities were always there. They were just ignored. There's another uncomfortable truth that history often avoids. Muslims in Maine have been judged more harshly than facts justify. Time and again, fear came from unfamiliarity, not reality. When people actually interacted, at workplaces, schools, hospitals, the fear softened. Human connection did what politics never could. And here's something most people don't know. Today, Muslims in Maine are among the most civically engaged communities. They vote, volunteer, open businesses, and serve as translators, healthcare workers, and educators. Their faith doesn't pull them away from society. It pushes them to contribute to it. That's not propaganda. That's observable reality. So, when someone says Muslims are new to places like Maine, history quietly disagrees. Muslims have been connected to this land through trade, treaties, labor, and shared struggle for centuries. They weren't always visible, but they were always there. Maine's untold history isn't just about forests and fishermen. It's about how a cold, quiet corner of America has always been part of a much larger human story. One that includes Muslims not as outsiders, but as participants. And maybe the real question isn't why Muslims belong in Maine. It's why this truth took so long to be told.